Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the first Boutique Hotel News webinar of 2026. And boy, do we have a very special episode for you today. Called CEO Spotlight, we will be hearing from two CEOs in a view from the top conversation. More to come shortly. My name's Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News, and we are an online trade publication covering boutique, lifestyle, luxury hotels and branded residences globally. A brief overview of how today's webinar is going to run. Effectively, our two CEOs, who you will meet very shortly, are going to interview each other. They are going to host a conversation among themselves, which gives me the chance to keep my beady eyes on the chat for any pressing questions that our audience members might have for our CEOs today. So do get involved in the discussion by submitting your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens so that we can add those into today's chat. A reminder that today's webinar is being recorded, and a summary of all the key takeaways along with that recording will be sent to every registrant within 48 hours. And if you do have time, please complete a very short survey that will pop up on your screen when you leave this webinar. We're always looking to improve what we do, and we would very much value your feedback. So let's meet our CEOs and ask each to introduce themselves briefly, and I will kick off with Charlie. So welcome to the webinar, and a short intro, please.
Hi, Eloise. Thanks for having me. Charlie MacGregor, CEO of the Social Hub, formerly the Student Hotel. Scottish, born, 4 kids, based in Amsterdam last 20 odd years, and a student housing background, and sneakily pushing my way into the hospitality sector.
Thank you, Charlie. And Billy, over to you. Welcome.
My name is Billy. I'm the CEO of Beaumier. We are a boutique hotel brand with 11 seasonal hotels in France, Switzerland, and Ibiza. I'm French, even though I've just moved back to France. After being 35 years abroad in the US, the UK, and Amsterdam, and super happy to be with you guys today.
Thank you, Billy. A gentle reminder that the LinkedIn profiles of our CEOs have been popped into the chat. Do connect, do carry on today's conversation after the webinar has finished. So I'm now going to pass the virtual microphone over to Billy, and the stage is our CEOs. So over to you, and enjoy the conversation.
Charlie, why don't you kick us off? I mean, the social hub has certainly been a standout concept of recent years, bringing a lot of originality on how to utilize real estate. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the kind of how the concept came about, and a little bit about the story of Social Hub.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, I kind of sneaked into the hospitality sector. My background was student accommodation when I lived in the UK, building purpose-built student accommodation blocks, normally under a residential license. And when I came to Holland 22 years ago, I saw students protesting in the streets because of the lack of accommodation. They were sleeping in tents on the campus grounds, and it was a huge market. And I guess if you look at it, the student accommodation market in the UK is pretty mature. It's like a sort of 18-year-old, if you're to put it in a human lifespan. So it's fairly mature, a little bit behind the US, but fairly mature. But the European student housing sector is really in its infancy. And 22 years ago, I was really the first person coming from the UK who lived in Europe who understood the model. So I thought, fantastic opportunity, great. I'm going to copy and paste what we did in the UK. And I tried to do that here. But the regulations around housing in Europe are pretty disconnected, but in Holland, particularly strict. So to be able to build a small room and charge the amount of rent I wanted was just absolutely impossible. But I had persuaded my first investor, real estate finance, Carlyle Property Group, or real estate private equity fund, to give me money to build student accommodation in Europe. And we bought 3 buildings with their money. And my mission was to try and find a way around and within the housing regulations. And to be honest, a long story short, that's impossible. But one of the things I did identify was in the hospitality zoning in a hotel license, I was quite free to decide the room size I wanted, and I was free, of course, to charge the rent, the daily rate that I needed. And for me, this was a big eureka moment because I thought, wow, this industry, students have such a bad rep of destroying places. But if I'm able to invite mums and dads to actually come and share their experience, to come and drop off their kids, to come and pick them up, to come and maybe celebrate birthday or to go and, do Paris together as part of a European adventure, then this is the way forward. This is really treating students like customers. This is bringing the mums and dads into their journey, which I saw was really important. And that's really how we started. And along the way, we added proper dedicated 4-star hotel rooms. We added extended stay, which was designed for the bridge between maybe the business traveler and the students as sort of young executives. Sort of think of the Nike kids coming for a 3 month traineeship in the head office here. And then we added co-working, which is a great way to bring in the locals. And then indeed the locals came into our lobbies and we started using it. So I think the student hotel built up as being quite innovative because we came into the hospitality sector through the back door. 3 years ago, we took the opportunity to rebrand, still trying to keep the TSH because we felt the business model is the same, the customer is the same, the team is the same, but we felt the brand was evolving. And we changed to the social hub, which really enabled us to really take a step up in terms of hotel performance, B2B connectivity, meeting and events, of course, became easier being called the social hub instead of the student hotel. But also we wanted to be putting social in the middle of our name, social responsibility. We're a very social business connecting different demographics and the neighborhood together, but also social in terms of the younger generation are finding it harder and harder to socially connect. And we felt this is one of our strengths. So that's really why we rebranded. So yeah, today we're the social hub with 21 hotels open across 8 countries in Europe and trying to find our path to really doubling the footprint in the next 5 to 7 years. So a little bit of a convoluted journey, backdoor into the industry, Billy.
Um,
And what about
so
you in terms of because you also have a bit of a backdoor into the industry. We were discussing earlier and we both realized that we sneaked into this hospitality industry, but maybe you can tell us
yeah,
your journey.
yeah. I mean, I started my career in retail, folding shirts in a clothing store when I was 18 years old. And even though I'm going to turn 50 this year, I still feel a bit like a fraud that I've actually never worked in a hotel in my life. But I fell into this business by accident, first on the sales and marketing side, where I really caught the bug and fell in love with hospitality and hotels. And I feel incredibly privileged, right? I've had a very enriching career where I first started in, like I said, in sales and marketing, and then very briefly in banking, then in private equity, and then had the chance of really start a hotel group where we went from being investors to developers to operators, and really enjoy kind of using kind of that two sides of my brains, both in creativity and finance, and now lucky enough to be the CEO of Beaumier, my third time being the CEO of a hotel group, and a great adventure here. Our group started about 10 years ago in the French Alps as a small hotel group. It was bought by KSL, a large private equity group, before COVID. The group has since doubled in size with a footprint that's gone just from France to Switzerland and Ibiza as well. And it's been a great adventure for the group. I took over the group about a year and a half ago. We've really been focusing inwards and in really being excellent at what we do with our existing portfolio, and now, hopefully looking at our second wave of growth coming up soon.
And Billy, when you look at that, I mean, do you think that coming outside of the industry, being in the industry has added has got a value add, or is there problems that you've experienced along the way which you wish you'd kind of been a bit more inside?
I mean, listen, I think I like to believe I've made every mistake that you can make, but I always find new ones to make. Um, listen, I think at the end of the day, what we do is very much of a human business. So, if you have that touch and the ability to work well with people, uh, whether it's on the development side where you're working with a lot of consultants, or on the operational side, or the people at corporate office. So there's a lot of different aspect to hospitality to making a hotel run. So, and it all starts with people. And on that front, again, I've made my fair shares of mistakes and I've had a lot to learn along the way. I'm not sure not coming from hospitality has been a originally has was a had a negative impact on that. I think at the start of my career, it probably had a positive impact because I didn't come with any kind of pre-notion of what a hotel needed to be like, right? And I had the chance early in my career to work on some very exciting hotels that had very activated public areas with bars and restaurants and spas, and not coming with kind of like a preformed formula of what that needs to look like or feel like. I think actually probably helped me because I was incredibly curious and kind of learned along the way and had the privilege to be able to do that. Uh, but
Yeah.
it's interesting, right? I'd be curious for you along the same line, right? Where again, you didn't come from hospitality. I think now you and I can call each other hoteliers. I think we've been doing this long enough. But where do you see now kind of the new wave of what's going to be new and that we're going to need to have to learn in years to come?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I look back, is also relevant to looking forward. So, when I started this, the idea that I had of mixing students, i.e., next generation talent or next generation young professionals or really young professionals, with B2B 4-star hotel customers or B2C 4-star hotel customers, with co-working, which was the locals, either freelancers or enterprise businesses, and then getting the locals to come into the lobby. People were adamant that this was not allowed. This was bad. This was never going to work. They, in Amsterdam West, in here, they made me build from the planning department, the architects, the bankers. Even my old man thought it was completely crazy. Everybody said, "Don't do this. This is going to be too dangerous." He said there was really going to be a mix of demographics, or old B2B customers would be endangering young student girls in the lobby. They made me build 2 entrances in Amsterdam West, one for the hotel and one for the students. And of course, I put a big sticker on one of the entrance saying, "This is not an entrance, use the back door," And everybody now, when you walk into a social hub, you see the magic that happens of bringing different groups together, and mixing different demographics or backgrounds or whatever it may be into one space. And I feel that that's much more a reflection of society. And when I look forward, to answer your question, into the future, I feel that the hotels of the future are a little bit more connected by a mindset of guests, as opposed to a demographic or a badge like millennials or Gen Z or whatever it is. It's much more of a mindset. And I feel that the magic happens for a customer experience when you're able to not go to just a business hotel, or not just go to one type of siloed experience. So I think that's, for me, where the change will be coming, where you're able to go into a hotel and experience a bit of local, a bit of international, a bit of business, a bit of leisure, all coming into one. But I'm in a bit of a blended situation where I think maybe I mean, can you just give us a bit of a background for the people who don't know your target customer, and then maybe where you see that your business as well is going to be unique?
You just touched on a pretty sensitive point for me. I've had pretty big arguments with branding agencies and marketing departments, and I think our target consumer is irrelevant. I don't ever think about who our customer is. I just think about us developing a product that stands for something, that allows people to create their own experiences and let people decide if they want to interact with us, right? I always use the same example: walk into an Apple store, right? Do we think Steve Jobs really thought about who his customer was going to be when he built an iPhone? He just thought about building a great product, right? And I think our industry just thinks too much about talking to one particular audience. And we live in a world now where people, at any given time really look for different environments to decide and dictate how they want to live their life. And it's very pronounced in traveling, right? Where I think 30 years ago, there was what you would call a Marriott customer or Four Season customer, right? Somebody who went around the world and that's what they wanted, right? But we can take it to our own personal lives, right? Sometimes we book a hotel and it's just a bed to sleep on, and sometimes we want to stretch our budget to stay in something special. And it all really depends on kind of where we are and what we're after. So a very long-winded answer to say that I don't like to think about a target customer. I like to think about who we want to be as Beaumier and what we want once somebody is in our environment, uh, the ability of what they can, but more importantly, how they can experience our product.
But just because I agree with you quite passionately on this side of things. But I guess what I find interesting on what you're saying is when you're trying to define your product, then is it something that you stick quite close to you as CEO? Hey, this is what I believe in passionately, or do you have, where do you sort of start taking market data and input from professionals or research, etc., versus what you believe the direction is? How do you balance that out?
I don't know how you feel about this, Charlie, but I think all best CEOs and visionaries actually don't try to project themselves in a product, right? So I don't think about what I like, right? I think about what I believe is going to be best in that environment. In the context of Beaumier, right? So first of all, you can't ignore where our hotels are, right? They are typically facing the Mediterranean. They're in beautiful mountain resorts, right? They're in beautiful countryside. So our environment, the culture, the locals around us play a huge part of the storytelling. And the reality is, no matter how great our hotels are, somebody is coming to one of our hotels to not only choosing to be part of our hotel, but to be part of that environment. So it can be, not only can it not be ignored, it needs to be respected and it needs to be embraced. So that's probably where it starts. To make that even more complex, right? A lot of all our hotels today, and I suspect that will be all our hotels in the future, they're not new builds, right? They tend to be hotels that have been there for a long time. And I'd like to believe we're just kind of writing that next chapter, right? So they tend to come with their own DNA and history, and sometimes there's some pretty cool stuff to take from that. So then you try to marry, okay, local culture and environment, what the building is giving you with what Beaumier has to offer, right? And if we can get that formula quite right, that's when magic starts happening in our hotels, and we are creating a great environment for our employees and for our guests.
And then it's interesting what you say. Do you have like so how do you like when you come to designing your room, who I guess when my experience is I've kind of gone through full circle in this. When I have like a bit too much of a democracy, then we end up bending quite a bland space, So we have a bit of a discussion. I'm pretty sure my team will tell you that I'm pretty passionate about what we should be doing, etc. But trying to bring in that sort of input, which is a little bit market data, of course, to make sure you're not too far off, but trusting your instinct as a leader, but bringing the team in as well. But how do you find that balance internally to make sure there's real identity in your spaces versus kind of a blended space? How do you find that balance?
I think that's a great question, and one that I struggle with, because I couldn't agree more, right? Anything you do by committee just gets watered down and tend to not stand for something as strong as it should. So ultimately, you need a very small group of people to build a hotel that are making decisions, right? But equally, you want to listen to the people around you, right? Ultimately, and I'd be interested in hearing your thought, right? I'm a hugely curious person, right? Wherever I go, I can certainly be accused of talking a lot, but I'm listening and asking always 3 times as many questions as I am talking, because I want to learn from everybody. And yeah, at the end of the day, there is a gut instinct, I think, to hospitality, to kind of making these decisions to make sure that you build something that stands for something, that has a point of view, that has an opinion. But I'll take any tips that you might have, right? And I'm incredibly, I'm incredibly opinionated, to your point, right? So but I try to find that right balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very happy actually the team are not part of this webinar. I can't have a totally different point of view from me. But yeah, I mean, of course, I think what's interesting, we changed the brand 3 years ago. That turned out to be the easiest part, reflagging and changing the website and all the hard work that went into that. It was a big project, but it went very well. And I guess what we wanted to discover was looking at it as a 5-step plan, change the name. Does the brand, can it handle a higher ADR? Can it have better business to business relationships? Does it change the inherent weakness? Well, I love the name the student hotel very, very much, but the inherent weakness of being called the student hotel in a commercial market, does that change does that change? Yes, it does. Then we started to see that the product needed to be upgraded from the student hotel to a new product, the social hub. And that's a project we're embarking on, and I've been embarked on the last couple of years. And we're now in a process of carrying out a refit of all of the 21 hotels to upgrade them to the Social Hub brand and quality of product. And that's from bedrooms to student experience to co-working to theaters to bars and restaurants to lobbies and all these things. And I think what's interesting is we went through a little bit of a period where I guess I took a bit more of a back seat, but then was pretty disappointed with indeed the democracy and the blend of space, because you start to say, well, operations don't want this for X, Y, Z, good reasons, but it takes some of the soul out of the space, or the operational cost of servicing a room goes down. Happy days, your Excel looks better, but hey, the consequences in a room is it's lacking that little bit of brand identity. And I think is what we've done now is we've gone sort of full circle where we're getting a much smaller group, to your point, who is really making the decisions and balancing those risk rewards of an Excel sheet versus customer experience. And we see that that's having a much stronger effect. At the same time, as we start to roll it out through the projects, we're aware that there's going to be, a reality of what's happening and what's working on the ground, etc. So I think there's quite a lot to try and learn from as we go along, and be aware that we're kind of making it up sometimes as we go along, being the first hotel that's got all of these facilities under one roof.
As I go
Eloise.
along for like 25 years.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
uh, listen, first of all the decisions that we make, especially when they come to kind of employee and guest experience, are rarely black and white, right? So there's never a clear right and a clear wrong, and that what I found most important is however you set your team up, and whether you want to be everything to be one decision maker or small committees and so forth. The most important thing to me is the ability to make decisions, right? I found that the worst thing that can happen in a business, especially when you're developing, where time tends to be even more expensive than money, is the inability to make decisions. We're always going to make some wrong decisions. I certainly do, and try to course correct as quickly as I can. But creating an environment where people are not afraid to make decisions, I think is most important.
Yeah, absolutely key, especially when you want to grow the business or adapt the business and et cetera, et cetera. Eloise, you got a question for us?
I do indeed. Thank you for taking a short pause here. Um, I'll kick off with Charlie first, and then we'll bring this over to Billy, because you've just highlighted that you're sort of upgrading assets and changing, the look and feel. You've also highlighted teams, Billy, and how important, team input is, and their belief in the vision. This question is all around technology and AI. And so as tech and AI become more embedded in hotel operations, which roles do you see gaining strategic importance rather than being replaced?
Strategic importance in terms of the AI, I guess. I mean, we discuss. I mean, we use as a PMS Muse, which for us is the most sort of modern property management system that focuses on customer, but also helps us, rent a co-working space for 15 minutes or a room for a year. So it gives us real flexibility there. We've been speaking to them quite a lot about AI. And AI is going to help our industry in untold ways. I think where we're looking at it, where I spend time is that I'm letting the muses of the world, because we're a fairly small company in that size, so let's let them worry about how to really build the optimism into the platforms. Where I'm really interested in trying to have the impact is how we use it to help our guests, and how we do that in a brand way that is fun, quirky, innovative, and at the same time just adding a lot of ease. I mean, if you think about it, you go to the hotels and you pick up your telephone and you have, if you're lucky, a choice of like 7 buttons to press going through to get through. And if you get to the wrong one and you want to ask a different question, you've got to hang up and go through it. I think AI can help us solve all of that. You just pick up the phone and you speak to one person, and I feel that the customers are looking more and more for that ease of passage. I think it happened very well in the airline industry, where we now certainly don't see it as a disadvantage. We see it as a luxury advantage, that you check in before you arrive at the airport. You don't have to speak to anyone if you don't want to, and you can walk through and walk off. I feel that in the industry has been perceived as a sort of non-customer service element, and I disagree quite passionately with that. I think AI can help us streamline that process very, very much, where then the roles on the ground, the reception role, will turn into real hosts. Where sometimes, you still today, you speak maybe more to the doorman than you do to the receptionist. And I don't see anything bad with that, especially if they're the right profiles and the right characters, and we're all aligned on what we're trying to deliver as a customer experience. But I'm interested to hear the more sort of exclusive end of the side with you, Billy. Where do you see this going?
Charlie, I now wish my team was listening to this webinar, because I use this airline example all the time, right? I'm like, the ultimate luxury now is to be able to go from your house to the seat of your airplane without talking to anybody, if you choose to do that, right? And that's something that really needs to change mind in the hotel industry, where we feel that human contact is everything, right? And I said, right, the human contact is everything at the customer's choice, right? I use many times the example of like being able to read the room when you have like 2 parents arriving with young kids who are like complaining and hungry and crying, and you're trying to give them like the 20-minute, glass of champagne check-in experience, right? And clearly that doesn't work, right? Um, Listen, a little bit like you, Charlie. I mean, when a lot of people are asking me about AI, and I feel quite qualified to run a hotel group, I don't quite feel qualified enough to understand exactly what AI is going to do to our space in the next 5 years, but I think it's going to do a lot. I think little groups like ours will copy what other people are doing, and I'm very comfortable doing that. We're not in any way looking at being innovators when it comes to tech, but we're looking to be smart and implement it in ways that make sense for our business. The only thing that I will say in our space that I have a pretty strong opinion about is, technology can play a role in a lot of different ways with guest experience. I feel pretty strongly that in an environment like ours, a guest shouldn't have to learn how to do anything. So I don't typically like these fancy systems in rooms and so forth, where unless it's incredibly intuitive, right? I think staying analog to at the cost of the guest just feeling comfortable and knowing how to turn on the lights and open the curtains and so forth. When it comes to AI, right, it's just going to make us better, right? It's just going to allow us to be better across whether it's more on the revenue management side of things, the accounting, kind of the back end of our business. and no doubt that it will allow us to provide a guest experience that we are not even thinking about today.
I think it's what's interesting about this question, Eloise, is even Billy and I are answering about sort of us as hoteliers, but think about the way you use it. So now I may use Gemini instead of Google. Give me a price, or what hotel should I stay in for X experience in a city, and then it'll give me 3 hotels, whatever. You can imagine the situation where you're saying, "Hey Gemini, give me a price between the Social Hub and the Hoxton in Barcelona," and it tells you it. And you say, "Book me a room in the Social Hub." Gemini should know that I am already a profile with Google. So great, it's got all my details. It's got my card, it's got my passport, it's got everything it needs. And the Social Hub, if I'm a repeat customer, should also know, hey, well, Charlie's already a member or a guest, and he likes to have a room on the X floor or whatever it is. And Gemini should just say, it's booked. So I think when you start thinking about the customer experience, I mean, the PMS, this technology is not that difficult. The part that needs to be resolved is who's paying for what. Because at the moment we have booking.com or somebody else in the middle of Google AdWords or whatever, who's getting all these little fees in the middle, where theoretically AI or telephones should be able to just act as a personal assistant and make that booking for us directly. And the next thing we know, we just get a booking confirmation, which is, again, the check-in information should be super easy. Why do we have to fill in all these forms? Because if Google should already know it. So it should be just, hey, there's your key to get into room 404 tomorrow night. Happy days, So I think there's a lot of simplicity that AI will power out. How that affects our business model, do we as hoteliers benefit that we're missing out? We're skipping the OTAs out of this. Do we have to pay a lesser commission to the Googles of the world or whoever wins that battle? Or can we have our own AI, which is able to facilitate any AI platform? So we're able to. So I think that's an interesting part of the business, because there's a massive chunk of all drivers, all of our hotel revenues, which gets swallowed up by middlemen. And will they be necessary when AI starts to grow up a bit?
Yeah, two things to add to what Charlie said. First is, for us on a very short term, one of the things we need to adapt to is, we feel as a hotel group, we were just starting to get good at anything SEO related and website optimization and social media advertising and so forth. And obviously AI is putting a huge left curve on that, and we need to kind of relearn, how we reach our customer. But no doubt that, that will evolve quickly and we'll work it out. But I feel right now we're at a bit of a friction point, because a group like ours felt like we were just getting quite good at it, and now there's certainly a new way for searching for information that is fast taken over. The second thing, going back to kind of the online check-in, right? So with a little bit of resistance from from our group, and an IT director that I brought over from our previous group, who was brilliant. We just introduced online check-in to our ski resorts this winter, and the take up has been tremendous, right? It's almost 40% of the guests, and what it's doing is exactly what Charlie was mentioning before. It's allowing that when that person gets through the door, our front desk person becomes the host and not somebody checking in somebody, and the interaction, that first interaction is just so much better. And across all our hotels, our guest scores have gone up this winter, and hopefully there's more than one reason for it, but I know that plays a part, because I always felt that it's such a friction point to have this very clumsy first interaction with the guests when they come to the hotel.
I think it can be done. I mean, there's some brilliant examples. I think in Europe, if you look at what Nico's doing with Bob W, they have, they're very they don't have reception, so they don't have the resistance that we have as hoteliers, where as a hotelier, when you start using architects, the architects design a hotel in a traditional way. When you start speaking to everybody in the industry, starts doing everything where there's a big reception, there's this barrier between the customers and the guests, or the staff and the guests, and so everything's kind of, you're when you're trying to be innovative in the hotel industry, you're pushing against quite a wave of just history of resistance. And I think what Bob W have done is all their check-ins are 100% automated, and it's a really, really smooth process. Big focus on B2B, which everybody says in the industry. Yeah, the B2B clients, they need to have a little bit of love and attention at check-in, and their guest reviews are really, really high. So there's so much evidence to show that this is really the way forward. And indeed, to your point, especially when you're traveling with family and kids, the last thing you want to have is like this ushered into this very quiet room, super boring, no activity, and given a glass of champagne and a hot towel. It's like, just let me get to my room and do my thing. And there's for sure a market, and there's for sure customers that want all these things. I think the trick is to try and identify those customers before who want this. But the mainstay should just be, as airline customers, just running through that whole process.
Yeah, that's just hotel just thinking about what they want and not what the guest wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I jump in here, because I think when we talk about tech and AI, we often do think about the end user, right? The customer experience. But as has been sort of echoed throughout the conversations up until now, it's actually your teams that are going to be utilizing or deploying said tech or AI. And I'm curious as to what that is having, what effect that is having, particularly when you're looking at building teams to take your brand and your brand platform into the future, particularly around recruitment. And as I mentioned earlier, getting your teams to sort of align on vision. A question from the audience is, are you seeing this demand for hybrid profiles where your team members are very tech savvy, but have a combination of operational knowledge and can, as has actually been touched on, they're starting to own the guest experience more. They're becoming hosts now instead of just a check-in receptionist. What are your thoughts around your teams and how you're building your teams in this new age?
Yeah, it's great. Should I kick off? Billy, are you okay with that?
Go, please.
Because I'm quite passionate about this. I find it quite interesting as well. I'm not sure the technology is such a big driver for me. I mean, I think where I feel that, especially if you imagine a hotel doesn't have a reception, so there's not a reception where there's a terminal and somebody's typing in something, which is again SOP driven. They need to click on this box. You need to allocate a room. You need to follow the process of the PMS to get somebody checked in. You take that all away, then you're looking for a character of a person that fits into your brand. You're looking for the interaction to be tying in with what the customer experience you want. So you're looking for a profile. So the emotional, the EQ of the person becomes much, much more important. I think when I look at our teams, I think that we can say that we're looking for real human interaction, which is much more. We're looking for the ability to be themselves, and to really be able to connect with a customer, but also then understanding the profile of a customer and being able to, if the moment is appropriate, to connect them with either a coworker or to really add value to their journey, whether they're here for a tech conference. Can they meet some of our tech entrepreneurs in our co-working? Is that interesting for them? So I think the emotional intelligence is becoming a bit better. Even sometimes, making sure there's higher qualifications in the teams as well, which means, of course, higher pay, higher salary, but because you're looking for a higher quality of interaction at that front of house level. So for us, I think you can teach the processes or the tech or the SOPs quite easily, but to try and get that sort of level of maturity and fun or just being themselves is where you're looking for more characters. Mm-hmm. How do you see that, Billy, in your side of the?
Well, I actually see it quite the other way, right? If you look at technology in hotels today, I always feel like hospitality is kind of a generation behind, right? And we still have some pretty clunky systems that we're asking staff members to get up and going quickly. So I don't think we're going to need tech savvy people in the future. I think we're going to finally be able to have a technology ecosystem that anybody can use, right? And so I don't think we're at any risk of needing engineers, right? This is all about facilitating and not making it harder. And then obviously, I totally echo what Charlie is saying, right? When it comes to recruitment and Clearly, if you need a chef, you need somebody who's cooked before, right? But as a whole in our industry, right, we're not saving lives and we're not performing open heart surgery. Find me somebody that likes to stand on their feet, smile, and connect with people. We can train them to do just about any role in our business, certainly in our hotels, right? And that's I hope, I think our industry has been guilty of underpaying people for a long time, and our industry has not been kind of this sexy uh, industry to work in recent years, and I hope we'll make a strong comeback because for people that have these personalities that do like to connect with people, whether it's to me it always starts with coworkers before it even touches the guest, right? I think we're a pretty special place for people to develop their career.
Hey, and Billy, I'm gonna quote you because you said something when we were having the sort of prep call for this, which has really stuck with me. You said we shouldn't confuse service with hospitality, which I think is appropriate to this. But maybe you can explain what you meant by that, because I love that sentence. Don't
Yeah, I
confuse.
think I don't know if you guys ever read this book "Setting the Table" by Danny Myers,
Yeah.
but he explains this brilliantly, right? But in short, service is the technique of delivering something to a guest, right? Hospitality is how it makes that guest feel, right? So they're two very different things, right? And it's totally normal, especially when you're trying to duplicate something over and over again, right? And you're not just one hotel to have some guidelines, some rules, right, on how you do certain things. I think that's perfectly healthy for a business to have. I think most people can be themselves even more when there is guardrails, right? Than if you just free will it, right? So I think that's great, but that's not hospitality, and I think a lot of people confuse that with hospitality. Hospitality is this this X factor of the ability of doing something that makes somebody feel good, right? And that's can be how you host somebody at your house, how you make somebody feel when you open the door for them, or how you make somebody feel when you work in a hotel.
And how do you train this, Billy? How do you get your do you have like a training methodology that you follow, or are principles or something like that? What's your training secrets?
Yeah, I think the secret is recruiting, right? I think we are all guilty in our business because of the quantum of people that we need, and especially for us, we have a lot of seasonal stuff, right? I sometimes, even though I'm not joking, like I'm like, we need to stop just recruiting people because they have a heartbeat, right? And this is not because these guys are unqualified. You're hiring to hire, right? And already these people are not right. So I think it starts with recruiting. Then it starts with the team that you're forming, right? I think what what I talk a lot about with the teams here is I actually use the Navy SEALs as an example, right? Like the greatest teams of all time, right? That talk about performance and trust, right? And they say people who have like high performance and no trust are the worst people to have in a team. And it typically starts with the managers at the hotel, right? When they see somebody that quite doesn't know what they're doing, they very quickly lose trust. And I said, when you lose trust in that person, they lose trust in themselves, right? So even before we go to training, it starts with recruiting and creating a team environment where there is a high level of trust so that people can really grow in themselves and feel comfortable being themselves, because you can't provide great hospitality without that. After that, I think training does start with more of the service element, because I think that gives also adds confidence. And then there is this X factor that you train for, of probably leading by example more than anything. I certainly haven't. If you have, I'll be interested to copy it, right? I don't feel like I've been able to like put something in a bottle that can be duplicated in really quote unquote teaching hospitality.
Yeah, if I had that in a bottle, I wouldn't be sitting talking about running a hotel, I think. Uh, but it is
Yeah.
interesting as well. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think the recruitment is there. I think one of the things that we've been doing the last probably 12 months is being aware of the culture from here in the support hub from my office and right down to the sort of the backup staff, whether it be maintenance or sort of outside cleaners, etc., is how to really build a culture that is social. So we've made a conscious effort to try and have more social meetings, you know, at management level, to not be led by PowerPoint, to just connect and have a conversation. And really, we kicked off last year our sort of leadership summit in a very social way. We had a Christmas party called the Big Social, really trying to make sure that everything we're doing is showing that by just having a conversation, not by sending an email or a WhatsApp, you know, by speaking to people is the way to get a lot of energy as well as transmitting information. And then turning that into a training as well by really trying to invest in teams, making sure there's training where it's needed, but doing role plays, showing people what happens when suddenly, you know, instead of trying to train people how to be spontaneous, we have a meeting, a social meeting, where we arrange something spontaneous to be in. So they see, oh, wow, that was fun. Wow, that made me feel great. Oh, it's really easy to do. And not plan it in on Friday at 4 p.m., you know? So really trying to help people with trust be themselves and be the brand. And that's, I have to say, that's pretty difficult in the hotel industry. I kind of feel sometimes, and it's getting better over the last 15, 20 years, but it's sometimes I feel that the hotel schools kind of train people how to be hospitable, as opposed to when they have a party at home, they're totally different, you know, and it's much more fun and relaxed. And so how to kind of break down those boundaries where everybody knows how to be a good host, you know, and how to then find those people who fit into your brand and your culture and letting them be themselves.
I mean, they did it because it's easier, right?
Yeah,
There's a reason why, you know, a lot of the hotel brands wanted you to stick to the script for so many
yeah,
years. It's just easy.
yeah.
I'm conscious of time, and I'm gonna try and weave in some questions from the audience again, if I may, because we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. And I'm going to combine two questions here. One was on wellness and one was on sustainability. And so it's really, how are you integrating wellness and sustainability into your business moving forwards? And do you have any advice, tips, giveaways that you can share with fellow hoteliers?
Carly, how about I take wellness and you take sustainability, since I know you're doing a lot of stuff on that front.
Yeah, perfect.
You know, I feel like in the past 20, 25 years, the hospitality business was a lot about food and beverage, right? And activating public areas through food and beverage. And that's here to stay, right? And that's not going away. But certainly in recent years, the word wellness, I like the word well-being personally better. I think it captures it all, in feeling good in your head, in your heart, in your body. And there's no doubt that for the next 20 years, that is what people, you know, are going to pay above the odds for, right? So people were hoping that if you had a cool restaurant in your lobby, somebody would, not only could you make money out of that restaurant instead of being a loss maker, but maybe you'd get 10, 20, 30 euros more out of your rooms, right? I think what people now, it's all about feeling good, right? And in our hotels, right, we want to make sure that we address this in different ways, right? Because let's stop thinking that wellness is about vacationing in your bathrobes, getting massages, and doing yoga all day, right? It can be about that, and that's totally fine. And we try to accommodate that when we feel the environment is right. But sometimes wellness and feeling good is about drinking a little too much rosé and eating a little too much as well, right? And we can't forget that, right? So I think when we talk about wellness and well-being, uh, well, obviously a lot is putting into health and fitness and so forth, and that forms a big part of our conversation. We try to not forget, right, that it shouldn't be at the cost of being so prescribed.
Mm.
I love that. Drinking too much rosy fitting into the well-being category.
That's true.
That's gonna be my new mantra.
You
Yeah,
heard it
super
here
nice.
first.
Nice answer. And then to sort of handle the sustainability side, yeah, I mean, of course, we're called the social hub because we wanted to make sure that we are social. We felt that our whole business model, everything we've been doing by bringing in next generation talent, connecting them with local talent, bringing in the hotel customers, B2B, B2C, and all that stuff, is very, very social. So that stuff there, we have a lot of social programming, from whether it be the same as everybody, the yoga class on a Wednesday morning to Friday drinks, whatever it is, looking at co-working, students and hotel. We've got all these different monthly calendar events. But on top of that, we said, let's put something a bit more structural. So we were aware that from our student residence to our co-working is focused on talent, and we're aware we're at the top end of the spectrum. So we wanted to create a foundation which was giving access to our facilities for people from not so privileged backgrounds. So we committed to carving out 1% of our gross revenues every year. We started our own foundation called TSH Talent Foundation, which basically pays for 10 scholarship spaces per year per hotel. And those scholarship spaces is not just providing accommodation, we're connecting it to mentorship. And the mentorship is provided by our co-workers, our own staff, etc., really guiding these next generational leaders who are coming in super motivated, super inspired, so much energy, and really making a difference. And so we're doing that as a sort of foundational element. And we wrapped up our social calendar or social initiatives by applying to be a B Corp a couple of years ago. And we felt that the B Corp label was on top of our GRESB and our BREM and the stuff we do as a builder and an operator, but was the only label which was actually giving points for the E, S, and the G, which was reflecting the target audience of our customers, i.e., younger generations. And the B Corp is a label for us which stands to benefit. The social hub should be benefiting the wider community in the local neighborhood. And I think what's interesting now is we've started carrying out what's called a social and an economic valuation. So it's a green book valuation of the business, and we can prove that the social hub as a business model, as a building in a city, generates about 4 times more social and economic value than a hotel in a neighborhood, in a city, and about 10 to 12 times more value than a standalone student accommodation block. So I think you start to see that the social responsibility that was highlighted a bit during COVID, these big black boxes that nobody's allowed to use, we're able to kind of address that by really bringing in sustainable tourism and connecting them to the local neighborhoods and getting the people who come into our building to really connect in a meaningful way and add value back to the city or the neighborhood.
We probably have time for one final question. I have a couple up my sleeve, but I want to hand it over to either Charlie or Billy. Make it count, make it significant, give it some oomph. If you have any, please fire away. If not, I'll jump in.
I've got a question for you, Billy. I guess I'm interested.
It's a lot of pressure now.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't rehearsed this, but I guess looking at us as sort of being entrepreneurial, coming outside of the industry into the industry, what is your advice to somebody else? I get quite a few sort of emails or LinkedIn messages. Hey, I've got an idea and I want to get into hospitality and stuff like that. What would you say the best route for them to do it is? What's your advice?
Oof. That's a big question you're asking. I think if somebody is looking to develop a new concept, right? We're a pretty crowded industry, right? I live and breathe hospitality, and every day I'm learning about a new brand I had never heard of, right? It doesn't mean there isn't space for innovation, right? But you got to find that right balance to trying to gain access to people who can give you genuine feedback, but also stand behind what you're trying to do, right? Because to what we highlighted quite a couple of times during this call, right, is a lot of people in our industry are pretty stuck to the status quo, right? So I'm not sure that's great advice, right? But I would say always finding that equilibrium between listening to yourself and getting some real feedback from others, I think is critical. And luckily, we live in a world today where I think gaining access to people, like you said, right? Somebody can drop you a line at any time on LinkedIn and try to get 15 minutes of your time, I think is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very excited about our space, right? Because you know, we live in a strange world right now. We talked about this a little earlier today, right? The macro of what is going on in the world is complex and at the time a little grim. But at the end of the day, the number one thing people want to do is create wonderful experiences. And at top of the list is travel. And top one, top two, top three is all about travel. So I'm incredibly enthusiastic about our space. So while it is crowded, I wouldn't be shy for people to still be encouraged of bringing new things into the space.
What advice would you give Charlie?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I agree with what Billy's saying. It's good to get advice. I mean, I guess if I'd listened to the advice, I wouldn't be sitting here. So it's trying to find that balance of um, um, following your heart. And I think there's a famous one with Steve Jobs as well. You know, the sort of the iPad or whatever, the iPod. You know, the research said don't do it. So I think that's a good one. I do think for me there has been an advantage coming outside of the industry into it. I think it's interesting. I mean, I do think, you know, you mentioned KSL. You have some very good um, bags of money out there that are looking for good concepts. So for me, the hospitality industry is actually quite an easy industry to get into if you've got the passion and if you've got the skill and a decent idea, because they're looking for leaders who have that passion. You know, I've been through the whole sort of 200 different interviews to find my first funding. Took me a long time, but I got it because somebody saw, oh wow, there's a young kid there with some passion and his idea is okay. You know, so I think there's an interesting angle to get into. You don't need to. I went the property heavy route. The industry is kind of built on the asset light route, so the risk profile's easier there as well. But it is it's so my advice is, you know, stick to your dreams and just keep fighting it. I always advise people to not go for the pot of money that they think is most likely to fund them, but practice on some of the other ones, even if they're bigger, because they know they're going to say no, but they're going to give some great feedback when they say no, and you can tweak your pitch and get
Yeah,
used to the idea you're going to have a couple of hundred pitches in you before you get a yes.
I wasn't in the room when you did those pitches, Charlie, and I'm sure your passion went a long way. I would put a little personally, I would put a little caution on that. I think if you have the ability to have something you're passionate about, I think it's a huge luxury. But equally follow your talent as much as your passion, right? So the ability to execute, you know, I have no doubt that when you were in that room, while I'm sure the passion got the room excited, your ability to demonstrate that you had the talent to execute went even a longer way uh, in your ability to raise capital.
Uh, let's see, we're trying to prove it every single day. So yeah, it's still work in progress.
That sums up our conversation so well, actually. And the question that I scribbled down on my notepad earlier was, what role has risk taking played in your success? And I think you've lightly touched on that, but in different terms of passion and talent as opposed to risk taking. So, Charlie, Billy, thank you so much for your time and for effectively hosting the first boutique hotel news webinar of 2026. Flagging here to our audience members that the LinkedIn profiles of both Charlie and Billy are in the chat. Do connect with them, ask for your advice, or ask for their advice, I should say. Please carry on this conversation. It's important that we collaborate and continue long into the future. Just some closing slides from me before I say a final goodbye. This is actually something that we talked about earlier. Our next webinar in March is called Let's GEO Crazy. So Billy, the evolution to SEO. So we're going to be looking at how AI is shaping hotel marketing and distribution. So that's search and discovery. Again, no cost to register. Would love to see you there. The link has been popped into the chat. And if you're interested in working with us across our digital events like these webinars or our in-person events too, please get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are on your screen and also in the chat. So a final thank you from myself, Charlie, Billy. You've been absolutely fantastic. Once again, thank you so much. Looking forward to supporting you both into 2026 and beyond. And I'll see everyone on this call early in March. So take care, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
At IHM, we believe in the power of connection. We exist to inspire, to inform, and to unite decision makers who are shaping the future of hospitality and real estate. Our why is simple. We believe this industry thrives when people and ideas come together. And we're here to make that happen. So how do we do it? We publish 4 leading multimedia brands, each a trusted voice in its sector. We blend intelligent content, curated events, and a strong community into everything we do, making it easy, accessible, and genuinely useful. From online engagement to face-to-face connection, we're known for being insightful, collaborative, and refreshingly human. We host world-class events, panel discussions, podcasts, award ceremonies, and webinars designed to spark ideas, drive conversation, and create impact. With over 62,000 monthly web visitors, 55,000 email subscribers, and 69,000 social media connections. Our reach is deep and our community is active. We're partnered with the biggest names in hospitality, and we'd love to connect with you. So whether you're looking to grow your visibility, meet the right people, or understand where the market's heading, read, watch, listen, and me. Do it all with IHM.